you've had a few more weeks now. I guess I'm curious. I mean, you've gone through this process, even though I guess this is your third school. You've gone through this process of learning an offense a handful of times just because of coordinator changes. Where do you feel you are in terms of grasping this offense, and what if you had to kind of sum up the state of things for yourself in this final week of spring ball? What do you say?
Yeah, I'd say I definitely feel like confident in how far I've come learning the offense, just me individually. I think the biggest thing for me now and the challenge that really, I feel good with where I come. I'm definitely not, anywhere where I want to be. It's just the details of all the plays in terms of, as a quarterback, you got 100 different things on your plate at every, every play, every snap. So really just getting the details, whether it's the kind of new motions, the tempo stuff we're putting in, the protections, really kind of, I'm an older quarterback. I've been around a lot of offenses, played, been a handful of schools. So I kind of know what questions to ask, what details, and I'm still learning, with Coach Grimes obviously kind of being an offensive line guy. I feel like I've learned a lot, so far from him and Coach Blas about the details of the protection game and the runs and the points, and really all that stuff that, for me, I feel like is, taking my next step of being a quarterback at the Power 4 level and making sure that I know, everyone's job at any given time and kind of what's the worst look we can get, things of that. So I definitely feel good with what we've done thus far in spring, but I don't think I'm, comfortable in that. I think the whole offense as a whole kind of takes on that same mentality of, we've made a lot of progress from practice 1 and even from January, when we got in here and started working at this thing. But I think there's a lot more that, we can tap into, and that's the challenge that I think everyone in this building, everyone in the locker room is excited for.
Billy, you kind of mentioned it there, but you have a lot of responsibility with line of scrimmage. How different is that from maybe your experience in your career before? And just, what is that? Do you like that challenge of kind of knowing, like, okay, if we get up to the line, it's not right, I have a chance to kind of adjust it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was one thing, definitely my last season at Maryland, that the more and more the season went on, the more and more they put on my plate. Now, right, it's just learning those same kind of mechanics, whether it's the checks, the protections, the get into a different play, and this terminology, this offense. So it's all stuff that I've done that I feel, very confident in myself doing. Now it's just getting the details of those things. Like I said, the terminology, getting with Coach Blas, on my free days to figure out, okay, well, how do we want to handle this protection? What's the worst look we can get to it? If we got a run play and we get a bad look, kind of just the ins and outs of that stuff. So I definitely feel, as an older guy, like I really, don't take that challenge lightly of knowing that, I came here for a reason. I knew it was going to be a new offense, a new system. It was going to be a lot of change. But I think, my mindset that I had in December when making the decision is the same mindset I, have today. And just remembering to embrace that, knowing that, there's all that stuff is on my plate is a blessing, and it's, it's good pressure, and, nothing's more satisfying than getting us into a right look and watching Dylan Jones there in the spring game go for a big run. So really just, that's going to be my main focus, for these last 2 spring practices to finish up this week. And then, once we get into May, June, July, like, we got to turn it up a notch. Obviously for myself, I think offensively as a whole, that's kind of what I told them, with the receivers and stuff after the walkthrough, but really just get into all that stuff and just embracing it, because it's a lot. The offense is a lot. There's a lot of shifts, motions, formations, but scoring is a lot of fun. So like, that's kind of what I told them. All that stuff should be a lot of fun. So just embracing it, really, getting after it is a challenge I'm excited for, to finish up spring ball strong and then get after it in the summer.
There's obviously Saturday it was the spring showcase, and it's really another practice, but it's a little different, with the crowd and some of the things, the way it's set up. I guess I'm just wondering from that experience, being in that venue with the crowd, was there anything you gathered or maybe learned from that specific experience that maybe you hadn't been able to gather just from being in practice in closed situations? Yeah,
I say definitely nothing new intel. I think obviously when I played here in 2022, I think the fan base speaks for itself in terms of the support we have. I think it was nice to be a little bit more of a kind of game environment, game operation, so really getting to see the play clocks, which we do in practice, but it's different, right? When you have music playing in the background, you got some crowd noise, some people into it, you kind of are playing as close to a game scenario as we're going to get right here in April. So really just, trying to have the mentality of a game and go through the process of, the first drive we had a long drive, we had some good things come, and then, second or third drive we had some penalties. So being able to kind of stay, middle ground, not get too high, too low, kind of deal with the sudden change of a game, whether, we just threw a pick, we just scored a touchdown, being able to come off the bench and be like, okay, let's go put a drive together. So I wouldn't say no new intel. I think it was definitely fun to get around the fans at the end, and see kind of all the support that we have and the excitement about this upcoming season. But I think for me, like you said, it was just the mentality of, it's another practice. Now we're in the stadium, we got some fans here, but, the job doesn't change.
I know you still haven't been here for all that long, but after a couple weeks playing in spring, are there any weapons or specific guys that you kind of feel yourself growing chemistry with on the offense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the past few weeks, I think obviously, right, you guys know the running back room we have, and obviously seeing some of the things they can do in the pass game is definitely a weapon for me. Speaking more so on the receivers and the tight ends, I think definitely the chemistry that I've continue to be able to develop with all those guys. I think Vinny Anthony, obviously, Chris Brooks has had a great spring ball. Jaden Ballard has gotten night and day better. Tucker Ashcraft is coming along. Jackson Aker, you guys saw him in there with the fullback, but we're not afraid to throw him the ball. Just some of those guys that I probably get the most reps with in practice, that I'm continuing to develop. Good timing and good connection with all that stuff. That's just what I was talking about. That after is the deep balls. I don't know how many times we'll get to throw the ball. Obviously, with the offensive line we have and the running backs and the capability we have to run the ball. But kind of my message to myself and them is when we do have the opportunity to, we got to hit it. Whether that's a deep ball, whether that's quick game, RPO. So just continuing to hammer upon that connection, that trust, that relationship. On the field, I obviously have great relationships with them all off the field. But obviously, it's one thing to come in here inside the stripes and be toe and toe with each other and knowing what we're doing at all times and be on the same page. So that's the challenge that I think we've all come a long way in spring. But I think there's, like I said, there's a lot more levels that we can tap into that I think will be the challenge to finish up spring ball and going into the summer.
Chemistry is something that like guys like us talk a lot about, and
appreciate it.
But when it comes to other than just throwing to a guy while in practice, how do you actually build chemistry with another guy?
I would say
both on and off the field.
Yeah, I would say I'll use the one of my good friends to this day, Ty Felton, receiver at Maryland. I had known him since we were in high school. I known him since I was 14, 15 years old. So when I came to Maryland, it was very quick that you could tell we just kind of had a little bit different chemistry. We didn't work out a whole ton in high school, but I think that relationship and that connection that I had with him this past season really kind of is my mold and model for coming here. I have great relationships with guys like Vinny Anthony and Chris Brooks, and Jaden Ballard and I were on the visit together when we came here in the winter. So we have all those things taken care of. Now I think the biggest thing for me, which going into my last year, something I've learned is just the reps of I know you're a great player. We got we're friends outside of here. We have good relationships. We talk to each other outside the facility. Now it's about coming here and really just getting the bank reps. And the deep balls, you're not going to get a ton of those really ever, not especially in spring. But that I think will be the point of emphasis for coming here and just the reps. It's something that takes time, but I think it definitely helps with kind of what we've established outside of here, the relationship we have, the trust. Especially when we go up there in the film to know kind of what we're thinking and knowing that we're on the same page. And now the challenge is to come out here and get the confidence in one another and the trust to do it on Saturdays when it's live and when we're out here in a game scenario.